Alright, so it may be a little dark in here, but what's been holding me up on the Pulsar project is this other project, the 4-ton geothermal unit, which I pretty much have all the piping hooked up now. I'm changing some stuff around with my manifold. What I'm trying to do is get these pipes up higher for more access into the unit, to the auxiliary heater, because I want to build a room around this and eventually put the water heater with a desuperheater over there, relocate it from the other side of the room. So I built that frame. That's going to probably have to be cut and re-welded to come straight up to do supports. Since I'm using PVC, I want to really support it good and pretty much tube block it. That means that since it's going to have pressure, the supports will also help to keep the pipes in place and keep any joints from popping loose if there's any overpressure. The duct work was really hard because the auxiliary heater needs 4 feet, recommended anyway, between the blower. So I couldn't do a straight up vertical unit because I only would have had 2 feet there to work with, and I would have been too close to the blower if the blower would have been right here in a vertical unit. So I had to redo all the duct work. Also, another thing with the geothermal unit was wiring the 15 kilowatt auxiliary heater up, or you would maybe call it inline duct heater. It has its own 240 coming in here, but then it has 2 legs, and then it calls for a fan relay in here. Well, after much thinking, I realized that for me to run this unit without the ground loop hooked up, I had to run a 24 volt line here over to the contactor to get that to fire up, instead of running a switch leg to run it off the other feed that's over there. It was pretty hard to figure out, but now I have at least auxiliary heat is going and I'm warm again, so I should be able to work down here more often. But that's just an overview on the geothermal. It's, you know, I'm doing a custom job here, getting ready to add temperature gauge and pressure gauges in for the input and output from the field. It'll just make it easier to see what's going on. You don't really need them. You can use PT ports, they're called. But now that I got this project under control, I can get back to Pulsar Model 3, which, if you're wondering, the reason I'm working on Pulsar Model 3 before I finish 2, I'll show you in the next clip. Well, if I would have checked the weather, I would have seen that I probably should have brought the Pulsar Pump 2 model up to the house. Much different flow after one night of rain. I have to take that into account when I'm working on these projects. And now my 300 foot of hose that was upstream is now downstream. I can see it's going to take a little time to get that all back together. I'm glad I anchored it down, or I'd be looking for the pump too. Alright, this is Model 3 before I start, and I'm working on a few ideas. I want to reuse the dip tube from Model 1 here. I'm basically just making more flow and a bigger air chamber to catch the air and let the water compress it in. I'm not sure about this yet. From what I've read about it, it says to constrict the flow right before, so the flow should pick up as in a Venturi and it slows down after it gets through to let the air bubbles settle out in here. I'm thinking about putting some steel wool in here to help separate the bubbles, as in a industrial air separator, which uses probably screens, not steel wool, but same concept. I'm not sure if I'm going to put this in right away. I was planning on putting, this is only halfway in. As you can see, it's a 2 by 1.5 bushing. So what I was planning on doing was maybe putting it in halfway, put my coupling or fitting on here, and then taping the shit out of it real quick. One thing I will say, I noticed on Model 1 is where I threaded in the Venturi, it did leak air even under that light pressure. So I'm skeptical whether just electric tape will work here. But the question is now, how high this will be my outlet here. So I can make this whatever I want depending on how deep I want to dig down by the creek, which I don't really want to dig too much down there right away anyway, until I make sure it works anyway. But how high do I make this? Obviously, for this to work well, I need to bury it enough that has the head of the water here and here to push down, or I should say up, on the airflow here. That would be the optimum model I'm seeing with this, and I'm curious to see how it works. Now, I'll be using the same diameter tubing that I was on the 1-inch diameter model. But I think with this added air chamber, or I should just say bigger air chamber, that it will give a little more room for the air and water to do its compression thing, and then push it up through the dip tube that I showed in the last video. And I think it's 1/4-inch tubing I'm using, which I put the threaded bushing in so that I could switch sizes, so I can actually go up to 3/4 tubing on this one. And I'll do more since it's pouring rain and the creek is flooded. I won't be able to get this down today.